Have you ever sat with someone you believed you understood completely, only to have one unexpected question stop your heart, open your soul, and shift everything you thought you knew? That's precisely what unfolded for me on a quiet Thursday evening, while relaxing in the den with my brother Lucas. What began as an ordinary night watching television transformed into an emotional awakening I never anticipated, a moment that forever altered how I perceived him and even myself. If you believe you truly know someone, just wait until their vulnerability catches you completely unprepared. Welcome, dear listeners. Before diving into this intricate chapter of my life, I kindly ask for your support. Please subscribe, tap the like button, and share in the comments which town you're tuning in from. Your engagement means everything to us. Now, settle in and enjoy. I never imagined Thursday evenings would become so meaningful to me, but ever since returning home for the spring season, they truly had. There was something special about how Lucas and I could exist together without forcing dialogue, simply letting the television murmur while we instinctively shared reactions and unspoken thoughts. That particular evening, the den was softly illuminated, warm amber light from the corner lamp spreading across the woven carpet and our worn-in chairs. Outside, the gentle rhythm of spring rain tapped against the sealed windows, a subtle reminder that life continued beyond our walls, moving and breathing, while we remained nestled in our private haven. Lucas had claimed the oversized armchair, the one he always seemed drawn to regardless of other options. I settled into my familiar corner of the sofa, feet tucked beneath me, a soft throw loosely wrapped around my shoulders. The film playing was one of those touching dramas we both secretly enjoyed but would never confess to anyone else. I had chips on my lap, and the scent of salt mingled with the subtle fragrance of vanilla from the candle on the end table, creating an unexpectedly soothing atmosphere. We barely spoke at first, allowing the scenes to unfold with only occasional remarks. Lucas reclined comfortably, fingers interlocked behind his head, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. Occasionally, I would steal glances at him just to observe him in the gentle glow, the slight upturn of his mouth when something amused him, the way his forehead creased slightly during intense sequences. I didn't notice I was watching him until he turned his head, catching me completely off guard. "You're watching me," he said softly. There was no mockery in his voice, only a gentle curiosity that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. "I wasn't," I responded hastily, flustered, though my face flushed regardless. He offered a faint smile, letting the moment pass, and I redirected my focus to the screen. But that instant lingered, like electricity suspended in the atmosphere, a delicate thread connecting us in a way that felt unfammy. Liar yet strangely comfortable. As the film progressed, a particularly moving scene emerged. The protagonist, wrestling with grief and remorse, made a decision that was simultaneously devastating and hopeful. I felt my throat constrict, and I was certain Lucas noticed my sudden stillness. When the credits started scrolling, he didn't immediately speak, which was unusual for him. He typically had a quick observation or witty remark ready, but this time, he simply breathed out slowly, as though carefully weighing his words before piercing the silence. Then came the question. A simple, almost offhand question, but it struck me with unexpected force. "Emma," he said gently, "do you ever feel like people don't truly recognize who you really are?" The words were straightforward, but the emotion behind them was overwhelming in the most profound way. I turned toward him, attempting to decipher his expression in the soft light. He appeared exposed, something I rarely witnessed in my older brother. There was no confidence, no protective shield, just Lucas genuinely looking at me as though he desperately wanted me to grasp something he had struggled to articulate before. I swallowed hard, feeling emotion rising in my throat, and answered honestly, "Yes, sometimes more frequently than I'd ever admit." He nodded deliberately, as if relieved that I had spoken it aloud, that I had acknowledged the invisible burden I carried constantly. "I experienced that too," he confessed, nearly whispering, "and I suppose I just needed to know if you ever feel that way around me." That question, so unanticipated and so intimate, sent ripples through my entire being. The room felt warmer, quieter, as though everything beyond our small refuge had faded away. I understood then that my connection with Lucas ran deeper than casual companionship or typical sibling teasing. It was grounded in comprehension, in mutual regard, in a vulnerability we seldom expressed openly. I reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear, and met his gaze directly. "I do," I said. "I feel it with you more than with anyone else. You actually see me." He smiled, but it wasn't the playful grin I was accustomed to. It was gentle, genuine, almost affectionate, and I felt my heart expand with a combination of relief and warmth. That evening, as we remained together, in stillness, the movie long forgotten, I uncovered a new dimension to our relationship, a silent trust that required no words yet communicated everything. And in that instant, I recognized that love and understanding didn't always announce themselves through elaborate displays. Sometimes they arrived in the tender vulnerability of a single inquiry, the honest revelation of a fear, and the unspoken assurance that you would always perceive and be perceived by someone who meant more than words could capture. By the time the night concluded, and we both reluctantly rose to switch off the lights, I sensed a subtle transformation within myself. It wasn't theatrical, but it was significant. A small, gentle awakening of appreciation, affection, and the deep realization that the people we believe we know entirely still possess the capacity to astonish us, to touch our hearts in unexpected ways. I went to sleep that night with a peaceful smile, the echo of Lucas's question resonating in my thoughts, a gentle reminder that the most meaningful connections often surface when we least expect them. And for the first time in ages, I felt completely seen, completely understood, and inexplicably unburdened, as though an invisible weight I hadn't acknowledged had finally been released. The following morning, I awoke to sunshine streaming through my bedroom drapes, casting golden lines across my floor. I remained still for a while, absorbing the quiet pulse of the house, mentally replaying the previous night's exchange with Lucas repeatedly. It was peculiar how one straightforward question could persist like a soft resonance circulating within me. I felt lighter yet curiously exposed, as though I had permitted him access in a manner I hadn't before. Downstairs, the house carried the faint aroma of toast and fresh coffee. Lucas was already in the kitchen, humming quietly, his presence filling the otherwise tranquil morning. I hesitated in the doorway, absorbing the sight of him, the way he leaned over the counter, flipping eggs with effortless skill, the sunlight catching the edges of his hair and giving him a subtle radiance. I smiled instinctively. I couldn't resist. He turned when he detected my arrival, grinning. "Morning, sleepyhead, didn't expect you up this early," he remarked, his tone warm and recognizable, but somehow I received it differently this time. "Well, apparently sunshine has that effect," I responded, brushing my hair back. I attempted to seem relaxed, but my pulse was racing in a way that created nervous anticipation. We ate breakfast in easy quietness, the periodic clink of utensils punctuating the gentle hum of the morning. Normally Lucas would fill the space with playful jabs or anecdotes about his friends, but today he was more subdued, contemplative. I observed how he paused before each bite, as though deliberately selecting his thoughts, and it made me understand that the previous night's dialogue had stayed with him as well. Finally he spoke almost hesitantly. "Emma, regarding last night, I've been reflecting. I rarely express this, but I genuinely treasure how we communicate, how we simply exist together, you know?" I nodded, feeling warmth radiate through my chest. "I understand. I feel the same way. It feels secure with you, like I don't need to perform." His smile was modest but authentic, and for a moment the space between us was filled with a quiet comprehension that didn't require vocalization. We finished eating, and I chose to venture outside for some fresh air, hoping the breeze might settle the swirl of emotions in my mind. The backyard was vibrant, with early morning energy. The grass glistened with morning moisture, and the trees swayed softly in the wind, casting moving shadows on the earth. Lucas joined me, and we walked side by side, the crunch of pebbles beneath our shoes the only sound besides birdsong. We didn't converse much initially, just allowing nature to move around us. But then he stopped, turning to face me, his expression earnest yet tender. "Do you ever feel like others demand too much from you?" he inquired quietly. I blinked, surprised again. His questions had a way of reaching deeper than I anticipated. "Yes," I acknowledged slowly. "Sometimes it seems like I'm shouldering everyone's expectations and I neglect to support myself." He nodded, and I detected something in his eyes that made my heart flutter. a kind of empathy and insight that I hadn't realized I needed so desperately. "I experience the same thing," he admitted, "and I believe sometimes we forget that it's acceptable to simply exist without proving anything." The sincerity in his words enveloped me like a comforting embrace. I felt an overwhelming desire to confide everything, to let him witness every apprehension, every uncertainty, every small insecurity I typically concealed from everyone else. And in that moment, I understood that with Lucas, I actually could. We continued walking, and then he paused near the weathered wooden barrier that bordered our property. The sunlight filtered through the branches above, creating a tapestry of brightness and shadow on the ground. He looked at me, and I could perceive the weight of unexpressed thoughts in his gaze. "Emma," he started, his voice gentler now, almost uncertain, "I understand I don't always demonstrate, but I want you to realize that I'm proud of you. Not for your accomplishments or achievements, but simply for you, for the person you are." I felt emotion rising in my throat, my eyes stinging with unexpected moisture. "Lucas, thank you," I murmured. "That means more than you'll ever realize." He reached forward, gently moving a strand of hair from my face, a gesture so familiar, so effortless, yet it carried a tenderness that made my heart ache with fondness. "I just want you to find genuine happiness, Emma," he said. "True happiness." I nodded, attempting to compose myself, and suddenly the backyard no longer felt like merely outdoor space. It felt like a refuge, a place where our souls could connect without apprehension, where conversation and silence harmoniously coexisted. As we returned toward the house, the atmosphere seemed lighter, charged with a quiet intimacy that required no explanation or categorization. I recognized that our bond had evolved. It was no longer simply about sibling ease or collective memories. It had transformed into profound mutual respect and comprehension, an acknowledgement of each other's frailties and capabilities. That afternoon, we spent hours together in modest, everyday activities. He assisted me in organizing my bookshelf, and I prepared fresh lemonade for us to enjoy on the veranda. Every glance, every grin carried the significance of our newfound closeness. Yet it was effortless, organic. It was within these small, apparently mundane instances that I experienced the most exceptional connection to him. A quiet yet powerful awareness that certain relationships can develop in ways you never anticipate. And as the sun descended lower in the sky, coloring the clouds with shades of coral and amber, I understood something significant. The questions that frightened me, the truths I hesitated to voice, they were the very elements that created room for love, faith, and understanding to flourish. And with Lucas, I was beginning to appreciate the beauty of being completely seen, completely heard, and completely valued for simply being myself. By the time darkness arrived, with stars scattered across the heavens like tiny signals of hope, I experienced a profound sense of tranquility. Our connection wasn't dramatic or showy. It didn't need to be. It was quiet, consistent, and authentically real. And in that quietness, I discovered a new layer of love and trust, one that I knew would remain with me, shaping how I perceived the world and the people I treasured. The days that followed were calm, routine, yet they possessed an undertone of something fresh, something delicate and valuable. There was a cadence to our time together that I had never previously recognized. The way Lucas made me laugh with a minor jest that would otherwise appear foolish. The way I caught him observing me when he assumed I wasn't aware. The way our silences felt substantial with comprehension, rather than discomfort. But as much as I cherished it, I could sense the tension accumulating. Subtle but undeniable, like distant thunder on the horizon, awaiting the appropriate moment to release. One Wednesday evening, we found ourselves back on the sofa. The same one where we had shared countless viewing sessions before. This time, it was a classic film neither of us had watched. Something vintage with dramatic lighting and tender, unexpressed yearning. I curled beneath the blanket, and Lucas settled into the chair, his expression distant, pensive. I could tell he was restraining something, a question or a thought that lingered just beyond his words. Midway through the movie, the protagonist, weary, conflicted, and achingly human, delivered a line that made me flinch. "Sometimes the individuals you believe you know best are the ones who surprise you most." I glanced at Lucas, and momentarily, the atmosphere between us shifted. He met my eyes, and I observed the slightest hint of hesitation. It was as though he had been preparing himself for something he didn't quite know how to express. My pulse quickened. There was gravity in that look, a vulnerability I hadn't witnessed before. Finally, he broke the stillness. "Emma, may I ask you something rather personal?" His voice was hushed, cautious, nearly trembling, and it made my stomach clench with expectation. "Certainly," I replied, attempting to keep my tone steady, though my chest felt constricted. He adjusted, leaning forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "Do you ever worry that I might not fully comprehend you? That perhaps I don't genuinely see you even after all this time?" The question struck me with unexpected force. It wasn't accusatory or resentful. It was tender, fragile, almost fearful. I realized in that instant that Lucas, who had always appeared so self-assured, harbored doubts I had never imagined. It sparked a rush of protective affection and an overwhelming impulse to comfort him. "Lucas," I said gently, reaching to touch his arm, "I see you and I feel like I'm seen by you too. We understand each other more deeply than we recognize." He exhaled, a sound of relief intertwined with lingering concern. "I just sometimes believe I overlook things, small things that are significant, and I despise the notion of disappointing you." I felt emotion building in my throat. I wanted to embrace him in that moment, to express everything, that he had never disappointed me, that his presence alone was sufficient, that his concern revealed his heart more clearly than words ever could. But instead, I squeezed his hand gently, allowing silence to speak the words I couldn't locate. The film continued, unnoticed. Shadows played across his features, and I watched him, trying to memorize the gentle line of his jaw, the way his eyes softened when he chuckled quietly at something on screen. The more I studied him, the more I comprehended how deeply I cared. Not merely as a sister, but as someone who had discovered in him a rare kind of understanding, a connection that transcended simple familiarity. Eventually I spoke again. "Lucas, I believe part of being seen isn't about flawlessness. It's about intention. It's about appearing, listening, caring, and you accomplish that daily. You might not always recognize it, but you do." He looked at me then, a long, deliberate glance that carried an intensity I couldn't quite identify. "Emma, do you genuinely mean that?" I nodded. "Every single word, and truthfully, I believe I've learned from you more than I ever acknowledge. About patience, about gentleness, about noticing the minor things that matter." A silence descended, but it was a comfortable one, filled with shared insight. For a moment I felt as though time had slowed, that the world beyond our den had paused so we could occupy this small space of honesty and vulnerability. Then the tension shifted again, subtler this time, almost imperceptible. Lucas's voice lowered, hesitant but determined. "Emma, do you suppose maybe we assume too much about each other sometimes? I mean, I feel like we don't express enough about how much we mean to each other." I felt a twinge of remorse. He was correct. We had spent so many years alongside each other, believing that merely existing in each other's company was sufficient. We hadn't always articulated the things that mattered, hadn't always conveyed the quiet gratitude and admiration that had grown between us. "I believe you're right," I admitted softly. "We do assume sometimes, but perhaps now we can alter that. Begin noticing, begin expressing it more." His expression relaxed and a small, almost bashful smile appeared. "I'd appreciate that," he said. "Truly." We sat there hand in hand, feeling the delicate gravity of truth settle between us. That night I understood that love, respect, and understanding weren't fixed. They demanded courage, attention, and the willingness to be exposed. And Lucas had taught me that lesson, without even intending to, simply by posing the questions that mattered, and daring to hear the responses. Later, when I retired to bed, the recollection of our conversation remained with me. I experienced a strange combination of excitement and serenity, as if a door had opened inside me that I hadn't even known was shut. I comprehended then that authentic connection wasn't simply about closeness or recognition. It was about truthfulness, about permitting someone to witness your imperfections and strengths alike, and trusting that they would embrace both. And in that quiet reflection, I felt a surge of thankfulness for Lucas, for our shared instances, for the small but meaningful ways in which we had begun to truly understand each other. I knew there were still questions left unasked, still vulnerabilities waiting to be disclosed. But I also knew that whatever arrived next, we would face it together with respect, trust, and an unspoken commitment to truly see each other. The weekend arrived with a calm, golden radiance that seemed to soften every edge of our home. It was one of those rare mornings where the air felt almost tangible, filled with possibility, quiet enough that even the smallest sound, the whisper of leaves, the distant drone of traffic, stood distinct. I woke with a sense of anticipation, though I couldn't quite identify why. Perhaps it was because Lucas and I had finally begun expressing the things that mattered, permitting ourselves to be seen fully without reservation. By late morning we were sitting on the veranda, cups of steaming tea in hand. The wooden planks beneath our feet creaked softly as we shifted, sunlight washing over us like a gentle embrace. I watched Lucas, the way his eyes captured the light, the subtle curve of his smile when he noticed me observing. I felt a wave of gratitude, a quiet wonder at the bond we had cultivated, often unknowingly over the years. "Emma," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable stillness, "do you ever consider how rapidly everything transforms, how life simply progresses?" I turned to him, detecting the seriousness beneath his words. "Constantly," I admitted. "Sometimes I wish I could pause it, even briefly, to really absorb everything like this moment." He nodded, his gaze distant, as if he were measuring the weight of time itself. I contemplate it frequently, too, and I realize I don't want to overlook any of it. Not our conversations, not these moments, not you. My heart stuttered. The words were simple, but they carried a depth that stole my breath. There was no exaggeration, no dramatization, just a quiet truth, a recognition of care and presence that resonated deeper than I had expected. "Lucas," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "you've always been present. But now I feel like I perceive you differently, and I think perhaps you perceive me differently too." He reached out, gently moving a loose strand of hair from my face, his fingers warm against my skin. "I do," he said softly. "I see you, Emma. All of you. And I think that's what makes everything else feel easier, lighter." I swallowed, emotions weaving like ribbons in my chest. "I feel identically," I whispered. "You demonstrated that it's acceptable to be honest, to be vulnerable, and I don't believe I ever fully appreciated that before." He smiled, a slow, heartfelt smile that made my chest ache with affection. "Neither did I," he admitted, "but now I understand how much it matters, how much we matter to each other." We sat in silence for a long while after that, simply allowing the world to move around us while we remained in our small bubble of understanding. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of blossoms from the garden below, and for the first time in ages, I felt completely at peace. It wasn't the absence of concerns or uncertainties, it was the presence of trust, of love, of a bond that had deepened into something almost sacred. Later, we decided to stroll through the neighborhood, the sun low in the sky, casting long golden shadows. We walked side by side, our pace unhurried, and every glance and smile felt layered with meaning. The world was alive, but we existed in our own quiet rhythm, moving together yet independently, connected through shared experience and mutual understanding. At one point, Lucas stopped at a small green space, the kind with weathered benches and an old fountain, and gestured for me to sit on the grass. I did, brushing the blades with my palms, feeling the soft earth beneath me. He settled beside me, and for a moment we didn't speak, just observed the sky transition from gold to deepening rose. "Emma," he said finally, "I want you to understand that regardless of what occurs, I'll always be proud of you. Not for your achievements, but for who you are, and I hope you feel the same regarding me." I turned to him, my eyes glistening, and smiled. "I do, Lucas. I always have, and I always will." He squeezed my hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of everything we had shared, all the unspoken truths that had guided us to this moment.